The last thing I remembered was the scent of roses and freshly cut grass. The next, his lips were on mine. Not gentle, not questioning, but a desperate, possessive crash that stole the air from my lungs and sent a jolt of pure electricity through my system. It was a kiss that spoke of ownership, of a deep-seated fear of loss, and my mind, which had been racing with 1,000 survival plans just moments before, went completely blank. I was kissing him back, my hands tangled in the fabric of his shirt, pulling him closer until the world dissolved into a dizzying spin. And then, I woke up, gasping for air, sprawled on a cold garden bench with a sharp, stinging pain on my lip. My fingers came away with a smear of blood. Across from me, he remained exactly as he was, comatose, still as a marble statue in his wheelchair, his face a mask of serene emptiness. But that kiss, it felt more real than the bench beneath me. To understand how I found myself in a public garden, tasting my own blood after a phantom kiss from a man who wasn't even awake. We have to rewind to the night my life was irrevocably hijacked. My name is Scott, or at least that's what I called myself in the life I was trying so hard to build. For most of my existence, I was known by other names whispered behind cupped hands. Jinx, bad luck, the boy whose family vanished around him like smoke. I grew up in the shadow of tragedy, a walking ghost in my own life story. By the time I'd managed to drag myself through college, surviving on instant noodles and sheer spite, my uncle, a man whose only real talent was finding new and inventive ways to ruin lives, especially his own, had managed to incinerate the last remnants of my inheritance. But I graduated. I landed a decent job at a top-tier firm. For the first time, I felt the fragile beginnings of hope, the naive belief that I could outrun the ghosts of my past. That illusion shattered with the splintering of my apartment door. They came in a storm of polished leather shoes and tailored black suits. At their head was a man who looked carved from ancient, unforgiving stone, his silver-headed cane tapping a funereal rhythm on my cheap linoleum floor. He introduced himself as Herbert Harland, a name that carried the weight of a death sentence in this city. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. A contract, thick and foreboding, landed on my coffee table. "Scott," he said, his voice a low rumble that promised no escape, "you belong to us now." My hands trembled as I picked up the document. The numbers were staggering, a constellation of zeros that made my vision swim. $100 million. A debt my uncle, in his infinite wisdom, had racked up with the most dangerous family in the city. And I, the nephew he barely acknowledged, was the collateral. I tried to argue, my voice a pathetic squeak. "I have nothing to do with him. We're not even related by blood." Herbert's eyes, cold and reptilian, didn't even flicker. He simply gave a curt nod. "Take him." A fist slammed into the side of my head, and my world imploded into darkness. I woke up not in a grimy warehouse or on a cold operating table, as I'd morbidly expected, but in a room that screamed sterile, expensive healthcare. I was dressed in a silk suit that felt utterly alien against my skin. My wrists chafed raw from rope burns. In the center of the room, on a high-tech hospital bed, lay a man. He was beautiful in a severe, sculpted way, all sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw, and a spill of dark hair against a stark white pillow. He looked like he was sleeping, a prince from some dark fairy tale. This was Leon Harland, the golden heir to the Harland Empire, who a car crash had reduced to a living work of art, beautiful but inert. The door swung open, and Herbert entered, flanked by a man in a long, flowing coat who seemed to have mistaken the hospital for a fantasy convention. This newcomer began waving a crystal pendulum over Leon's still form, muttering about astral planes and energetic resonance. After a moment of theatrical concentration, he pointed a long, bony finger directly at me. "This one," he declared, his voice filled with a chilling certainty. "His spiritual chart is a perfect match. He is the catalyst required to awaken him." I thought I was going to be sick. "I'm a man," I managed to choke out, the words tasting like ash. The ropes bit into my wrists as I struggled. "This is certifiably insane." The mystic simply arched an eyebrow. "The physical form is irrelevant. His life force is potent, compatible. He is our most viable option." Herbert nodded, as if they were discussing the weather. A hulking figure ripped the tape from my mouth, taking a strip of my skin with it, and then the so-called ceremony began. It was a hallucinatory blur of chanting, the cloying scent of incense, and Herbert's unwavering predatory gaze fixed on me. When it was over, they cut my bonds. Herbert placed a heavy hand on my shoulder, his lips stretching into a grin that held no warmth, only triumph. "Welcome to the family, son-in-law." I was too deep in shock to even form a protest. They didn't throw me in a dungeon. The reality was far more insidious. I was installed in the sprawling, opulent Harland estate, a prisoner in a gilded cage. Strangely, no one watched me. There were no guards at my door. They were so confident in their power, so certain of their reach, that the thought of me running was laughable to them. The next morning, Herbert invited me for coffee. "That new job of yours," he said, stirring his cup with casual indifference. "At the prestigious firm? We own it. I was thinking of a promotion for you. Perhaps a managerial position." I stared into the black depths of my coffee, my stomach twisting into a painful knot. "No, thank you," I mumbled. He let out a dry chuckle. "I understand. The ambitious man prefers to forge his own destiny. Very well. What if I financed a startup for you? Your name as CEO?" I shook my head, my jaw clenched so tight it ached. This wasn't kindness. These were shackles, each one heavier than the last. The Harlands were an octopus, their tentacles wrapped around every profitable and illicit enterprise in the city. To run would be suicide. "What is it you want from me?" I asked, cutting through the charade. His smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "Spend time with Leon. That's all. Just be with him." For the first time, I heard something other than command in his voice, a flicker of a grandfather's desperation. I nodded, not out of compassion, but out of the cold, hard calculus of survival. My life settled into a bizarre rhythm. I clung to my day job as a lifeline to normalcy, but my evenings were spent in that sterile hospital room, a silent sentinel by Leon Harlan's bed. He remained a statue, a network of tubes, his only connection to the living world, the steady beep of the monitors the only sound. What was I supposed to do? Tell him stories? Read him the stock market report? Most nights I just sat there, scrolling through my phone, occasionally muttering to the silent room, "This is the most ridiculous situation in human history." Herbert was, in his own twisted way, generous. $10,000 appeared in my bank account each month, clinically labeled allowance. It was blood money, a bribe to ensure my compliance, and it made my skin crawl. The breaking point came one night when I was getting a bottle of water from a vending machine down the hall. I heard voices from a slightly ajar office, Herbert's voice, low and grim. "If Leon doesn't recover, the family's stability is paramount. We cannot show weakness. He is ours, conscious or not. And if the worst should happen, dispose of the boy. He's a loose end. A shard of ice pierced my heart. The boy. He meant me. I was the disposable component in their mystical experiment. If Leon died, my life was forfeit. I crept back to his room, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The Harland Empire wasn't built on handshakes and goodwill. It was built on bodies, and I had no illusions that mine would be any different. By morning, I was a frayed nerve, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold a coffee cup. Herbert was at the hospital, radiating paternal warmth, as if he hadn't just casually ordered my execution. Leon's vitals are fluctuating, he announced with a grim smile. It's a critical time. You'll be staying here full-time now. Your job can wait. The unspoken threat hung heavy in the air. I nodded, my throat too dry to speak. Back in Leon's room, my mind was a whirlwind of panicked thoughts. I needed an escape plan. I needed leverage. And then I saw him, a familiar face in the hallway, all easy charm and impeccably tailored suits. "Tom?" I said, my voice cracking. He turned, and a slow, familiar grin spread across his face. "Scott, what in the world are you doing in a place like this?" It was Tom, the guy I'd relentlessly dodged in college. He'd been persistent, charming, and everything I couldn't afford to get involved with while I was just trying to stay afloat. Now, I learned he was Leon Harlan's right-hand man, the de facto second-in-command of this criminal empire. I managed a weak smile. It's a very long, very awkward story. He laughed, a smooth, practiced sound. Just trying to keep the empire from crumbling while the boss is on vacation. You know the drill. My mind latched onto that. Power, connections, a potential shield against Herbert. "It's good to see a friendly face," I said, consciously softening my voice, letting a hint of my old college vulnerability show. His eyes flickered with a mixture of surprise and pleasure. "Yeah, well, stick around. I could use the company." I forced a smile, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm. This was it. This was my way out. If I could make Tom my ally, my protector, maybe I wouldn't end up in a shallow grave. But as my gaze fell on Leon's motionless form, a bitter wave of self-loathing washed over me. I wasn't a good person, but using a man in a coma to seduce his best friend felt like a new level of low, even for me. I was no stranger to the art of manipulation. My uncle's endless schemes had been a masterclass in survival. Herbert's thinly veiled threat was a guillotine hanging over my head, and I had no intention of waiting for it to drop. Tom was my lifeline, my only viable play in this lethal game. He had influence, authority, and, most critically, a lingering fondness for me from our university days. If I could reel him in, make myself indispensable to him, Herbert wouldn't dare touch me. I began my campaign subtly. I'd accidentally bump into him in the hospital corridors, offering a small, hesitant smile that was more invitation than greeting. "Hey, Tom," I'd say one afternoon, holding up a file from my now-defunct job. "Could you give me a hand with this? It's all corporate nonsense to me." It was a flimsy pretext, but he didn't seem to mind. He leaned in, his shoulder brushing mine, his breath warm against my ear as he explained a term I already knew perfectly well. "You're much sharper than you pretend to be, Scott," he murmured, a smirk playing on his lips. "Why did you always play so hard to get back then?" I shrugged, letting my fingers graze his arm as I retrieved the file. Timing, I suppose. My life was chaotic. He chuckled, his gaze holding mine a second too long. Well, I can be a very patient man. It was working perhaps too well. Tom's visits became more frequent. He'd bring me coffee, linger in Leon's room under the pretense of checking in, and drop casual compliments that felt like tiny, sharp barbs of guilt under my skin. I felt nothing for him, not in that way, but my survival instincts didn't care about my feelings. Every shared laugh, every fleeting touch was a calculated move on a chessboard where my life was the prize. I hated the person I was becoming, but I was terrified of the alternative. Inside Leon's room, I maintained the facade for any watching eyes. I'd sit by his bed for hours, murmuring pointless updates about the world outside. Leon, of course, remained a silent effigy of a man. But sometimes, when I was close, I could have sworn I saw the flicker of an eyelid, a twitch in his fingers. I dismissed it as a product of my increasingly frayed nerves. The nurses, with their professional sympathy, had started calling me Mr. Harland, a title so absurd it felt like a slap in the face. I just grit my teeth, nod, and methodically peel an apple one had no intention of eating, just to have something to do with my hands. One evening, Tom appeared with a grease-stained paper bag. Figured you could use something that didn't come from a hospital cafeteria, he said, handing me a burger. We sat in the chairs opposite Leon's bed. The rhythmic beep of the heart monitor, a macabre dinner soundtrack. For a moment, it felt almost normal. So Tom began, leaning back. How are you holding up? This entire situation has to be messing with your head. I took a large bite to buy myself time. Messing with my head is the understatement of the century, I said after a long chew. Do you ever think this whole spiritual bonding thing is just Herbert finally losing his mind? Tom let out a genuine laugh. Oh, you have no idea. If Leon were awake, he'd be having a field day with this. But Herbert's from the old world. He believes in signs, in fate. He has his reasons. I raised an eyebrow, probing gently. Reasons? Like what exactly? Tom's smile tightened. Like maintaining the family's image of strength. Things are unstable right now. Our rivals are circling like vultures. Leon is the one who holds it all together. Without him, it's anarchy. I filed that information away. Desperation made men like Herbert even more dangerous. I leaned in, lowering my voice conspiratorially. If things go sideways, you have a contingency plan, don't you? You're more than just Herbert's second. His eyes narrowed, a flicker of intrigue replacing his easy charm. What's this, Scott? Are you planning a coup? I grinned, keeping my tone light. Just trying to figure out who holds the real power around here. He laughed again, but there was a new glint in his eyes. Stick with me. You might just find out. Just as I was about to press him further, the air in the room seemed to shimmer, like heat rising from summer asphalt. And then, floating in the space between us, words materialized in glowing, ethereal text. I nearly dropped my burger. Gross dude. Leon's right there, and you're hitting on his second in command. I blinked, my heart hammering against my ribs. Another line of text scrolled into view. Can't blame him. The kid's got no leverage. The Harlands will eat him alive if he doesn't play dirty. What in the fresh hell was this? The words kept appearing. A phantom chat log that only I could see. Poor Scott. He doesn't know about Leon's system. The only way Leon wakes up is through intimate moment points. Someone's got to get real cozy with him. A new message appeared. This one with a more ominous tone. Yeah, but don't betray him. The guy can manipulate dreams. He can literally kill people in their sleep. Cross him and you're dead. I froze, the burger forgotten in my hand. Tom was still talking, but his voice was a distant buzz. A system. Dream control. This was beyond insane. But the words felt viscerally real, as if they were leaking from another dimension, spilling secrets I was never meant to know. And if Leon was aware, if he was conscious on some level, then my little seduction of Tom wasn't a survival plan. It was a signed and sealed death warrant. Scott, you with me? Tom's voice broke through the fog. He was frowning, a look of concern on his face. I snapped back to reality, shoving the rest of the burger into my mouth to hide my panic. Yeah, sorry. Just zoned out. It's been a long day. He accepted the excuse, but his gaze lingered, a hint of suspicion in his eyes. I quickly changed the subject, but my brain was screaming. I had to change my strategy, and I had to do it now. If Leon's bizarre system was my only true path to survival, then getting cozy was no longer an option. It was a necessity. After Tom left, he pressed a hotel key card into my hand. In case you need a break from all this, he said, his voice low and suggestive. His fingers brushed against mine, and I had to physically restrain myself from recoiling. Think about it. I pocketed the card, my stomach churning with a toxic mix of fear and guilt. The moment the door closed behind him, I turned my attention to the man in the bed. His face was placid, but those glowing words were seared into my mind.
Intimata moments.
Dream control. To hell with it. I wasn't going to die because of some mob family's internal power struggles. I carefully climbed onto the edge of the bed, trying not to disturb the array of tubes and wires. My hands were shaking as I leaned over his still form, my voice a ragged whisper. All right, Leon. Let's make a deal. You wake up, and I don't end up in a ditch somewhere. Sound fair? There was no response, of course, but I saw it clear as day. The shell of his ear turned a shade redder. I swallowed, my own face burning with a mixture of embarrassment and desperation. Look, I'm not some kind of pervert, but if this system thing is real, then I'm your best bet. So just don't murder me in my sleep, okay? I leaned even closer, my breath catching in my throat. I can, handle things, whatever it takes. The words felt absurd coming out of my mouth, but I was out of options. The air shimmered again. Oh wow, he's actually going for it. This is not how I envisioned this scenario unfolding. Another line appeared. Get it, Scott? I groaned, burying my hot face in my hands. Shut up, I muttered at the invisible peanut gallery. Then, to Leon, I added, you had better appreciate the lengths I'm going to hear. I slid off the bed, my heart racing. Tom's key card in my pocket felt like a live grenade. I had to get rid of it. But as I looked at Leon, I saw his fingers, which had been limp and lifeless for months, slowly curl into a loose fist. I had just made a choice, and I had a terrifying feeling it was either the smartest or the most catastrophically stupid decision of my entire life. Herbert had me on a choke chain now. My job was gone, along with any lingering illusion of a life outside the Harland family's suffocating embrace. My entire world had shrunk to the four walls of Leon's hospital room, where my designated role was to be the devoted spouse to a man trapped in the silent prison of his own mind. The nurses continued to call me Mr. Harland, and each time they did, I felt a fresh wave of revulsion. But I would just smile, nod, and swallow the scream that was perpetually lodged in my throat. Survival was a performance, and I was playing the part of a lifetime. The floating text messages, the bulletins as I'd started to call them, had made the rules of the game terrifyingly clear. Wake Leon with intimacy, or face the consequences. Fine. I could play this game. I started with the path of least resistance, trying to figure out what the system would register as intimate without making me feel like a complete monster. I moved my chair closer to his bed, resting my hand on his forearm as I filled the oppressive silence with mindless chatter. I talked about movies I'd seen, the weather, the questionable quality of the hospital food. It was a one-sided conversation with a statue, but sometimes I'd feel his pulse quicken beneath my fingertips. The monitors remained stubbornly stable, but I clung to those tiny, imagined reactions. One afternoon, emboldened by a flicker of desperation, I purloined a bottle of massage oil from a nurse's supply cart. "You better be worth it, buddy," I muttered to his unmoving form. I worked the oil into his shoulders and back, keeping my touch clinical, detached. His skin was surprisingly warm and supple for someone who had been bedridden for so long. The bulletins, my ever-present and annoyingly snarky audience, immediately appeared. "Ooh, Scott's getting handsy. Look at that professional technique. Bet Leon's enjoying this on some subconscious level." Another one popped up. "Check that heart rate monitor. Something's happening." I shot a glare at the empty air where the text hovered. "Can you all just mind your own business?" I hissed, my face flushing. But I did glance at the monitor, and there it was, a small but undeniable uptick in his heart rate. So this was working. I pressed on, my monologue continuing. "You owe me so much for this, you have no idea. I am not your personal masseuse." The tip of his ear turned a bright, telltale pink. I paused, squinting at him. "Are you actually hearing this? Or is that just a circulatory phenomenon?" No reply, naturally. I shook my head and continued, but a thick layer of guilt was beginning to settle over me. This felt deeply personal, a violation of a boundary I couldn't even define. Herbert visited one morning, his eyes gleaming with an unnerving, knowing light. "You're doing excellent work, Scott," he said, giving my shoulder a proprietary clap. "Leon seems more present. There's a different energy in the room." He smiled that shark-like smile of his. "Why don't you take him outside? A bit of fresh air could work wonders." I stared at him, dumbfounded. "Take him out? He's in a coma." Herbert waved a dismissive hand. "There's a wheelchair in the closet. The hospital has a lovely garden. Go on, enjoy the day." Before I could formulate a protest, a nurse had wheeled in the chair and 2 orderlies were efficiently transferring Leon's limp body into it. His head lolled to one side, but his expression was serene. I was handed the handles and pushed out the door, feeling like the world's most morbid chaperone. The garden was an oasis of calm, a stark contrast to the storm in my head. I pushed Leon along a gravel path, feeling like an absolute fool. "This is insane," I muttered under my breath. "What am I supposed to do now? Narrate the pansies for you?" The bulletins flickered into existence. A romantic stroll. How thoughtful. Bet Leon's swooning in there. "You're a natural at this, Scott. Find a nice, secluded tree. Make it picturesque." I groaned, steering the wheelchair toward a large, shady oak. "You guys are the absolute worst," I grumbled at the air. I parked the chair and sat on a nearby bench, studying Leon's face. A lock of his dark hair had fallen across his forehead. In that moment, stripped of his family's power and reputation, he just looked vulnerable. I found myself wondering what he was like when he was awake. probably an arrogant, entitled rich kid. But here, now, there was a softness to him that was strangely compelling. Acting on an impulse I didn't understand, I leaned over and gently brushed the hair from his face. His lips parted almost imperceptibly, and my stomach performed a strange, weightless flip. And then the world tilted on its axis. The vibrant colors of the garden bled away, replaced by the dim, sterile gray of Leon's hospital room. But he wasn't in the bed. He was leaning against the far wall, arms crossed over his chest, his eyes sharp, lucid, and fixed directly on me. "Hey, Scott," he said, his voice a low, teasing drawl. "Having a good time with Tom?" My blood ran cold. How are you?" He pushed himself off the wall and took a step toward me, his gaze pinning me in place. "You have a thing for him, don't you? All those little smiles, the accidental touches. Did you really think I wouldn't notice?" My heart was a drum against my ribs. This had to be a dream. The bulletins had warned me about this, his ability to control dreams. "It's not what you think," I stammered, my defenses crumbling. I didn't mean anything by it." His expression softened, but his eyes were filled with a raw, undeniable hurt. "Then why did you accept his key card? Were you planning on leaving me?" I shook my head, a wave of desperation washing over me. I was scared. "Okay, Herbert is going to have me killed if you don't wake up. I was just trying to survive." He was closer now, so close I could feel the heat radiating from his body. "You don't need Tom for that," he said, his voice dropping to an intimate whisper. "You have me. Just stay with me." "Okay." Before I could answer, his hands were on my face, his thumbs gently stroking my cheeks. And then his lips crashed into mine. It was firm and warm and real, and my brain simply shut down. I was kissing him back, my hands clutching his shirt, until the world spun and I was jolted awake. I was back on the garden bench, gasping. Leon was still in his wheelchair, completely unchanged. But my lip was stinging. I touched it, and my fingers came away with a speck of blood. I'd bitten myself. Hard. What the hell was that? I whispered, my face on fire. The bulletins reappeared, practically vibrating with glee. "Damn, Scott, he literally branded you. Leon's out here staking his claim. R.I.P. your lips, bro." I buried my face in my hands, utterly mortified. Was that real? Was that Leon reaching out from his subconscious? Or was my own mind just cracking under the pressure? I risked a glance at him, and I saw his fingers twitch again. It was subtle, but it was undeniably real. My pulse skyrocketed. I had to get him back inside, now. I wheeled him back at a near run, flagging down the first nurse I saw. "He moved," I said, my voice shaking. "His hand, you need to check him. Please." The nurse called a doctor, and soon the room was a flurry of activity as Leon was whisked away for a battery of tests. I didn't wait around. My head was a chaotic mess of dreams and reality. I needed to breathe. I slipped out of the hospital, ignoring the bulletin's triumphant taunts, and walked. Whatever had just happened in that garden, I was no longer a pawn in their game. I was a part of it, in deeper than I could ever have imagined. Leon was awake. The news hit me like a physical blow, but I wasn't there to witness it. I was holed up in my tiny apartment, pacing the worn floorboards, my mind still reeling from the phantom kiss and the very real blood on my lip. A curt text from Herbert buzzed on my phone. "Get to the hospital. Now." A part of me screamed to run, to pack a bag and vanish into the anonymity of another city. But the Harlans had a long reach, and I knew I wouldn't make it to the state line. So I went. The hospital was humming with a nervous energy, the air thick with whispered conversations and an increased security presence. I slipped into Leon's room, half expecting a quiet, tender reunion. Instead, I walked into a war zone. Leon was sitting up in bed, looking pale and gaunt but unmistakably alert, his eyes sharp and clear. Herbert was there, beaming like a proud patriarch. But the room was dominated by another man, Ray, Leon's father, his voice a whip-crack of authority. Clinging to his arm was a young woman, polished and perfect in a designer dress, her smile as bright and hard as a diamond. "Leon, this is Clara," Ray announced, gesturing to the woman. "Your fiancée. The arrangement with her family has been finalized. It will solidify our position." I froze in the doorway, the air leaving my lungs in a painful rush.
Fiancé?
Herbert cleared his throat, a loud, pointed sound. "Ray, Leon already has a partner. Scott has been here fulfilling his obligations." Ray's cold eyes snapped to me, his gaze sweeping over me with blatant disdain. "This boy? The jinx? Don't be ridiculous." He tossed a manila folder onto Leon's bed, its contents spilling out. "His entire family history is a catalog of death and misfortune. And his uncle is a parasite who nearly bled us dry. He is a nobody." The word jinx struck me like a physical blow. I felt the blood rush to my face, my hands clenching into fists at my sides, but I remained silent. Herbert's jaw tightened, but he didn't refute his son's cruel assessment. Leon's gaze flickered to me for a brief, unreadable moment. The room felt suffocating, the air charged with a hostility aimed directly at me. I backed out of the room slowly. No one tried to stop me. In the hallway, I practically collided with Tom. He was leaning against the wall, arms crossed, as if he'd been waiting for me. "Tough crowd." "Huh?" he said, his voice uncharacteristically gentle. I let out a bitter, humorless laugh. "You could say that. Apparently, Ray's been doing his homework." Tom took a step closer, his hand coming to rest on my shoulder. "You're more than what he says you are. Come on. Let me get you out of this madhouse." I hesitated for a moment, but Ray's words were echoing in my head, a poisonous refrain. "Jinx. Nobody." I gave a small, defeated nod. Tom moved with surprising efficiency, using his authority to get me past the Harlan security and out of the hospital discreetly. By nightfall, I was on a train heading out of the city, back to the sleepy, forgotten town where I'd spent my early childhood, a place I hadn't seen in over a decade. Tom stayed with me until the train was about to depart. "I'm sorry," I said, unable to meet his eyes, "for, trying to use you. I was just so scared." He offered a sad, half-smile. "Don't worry about it. In a twisted way, I'm flattered you thought I was worth the effort." He glanced at his phone. "Train's leaving. Take care of yourself, Scott." I gave his hand a quick, grateful squeeze and disappeared into the throng of passengers. As the train lurched forward, carrying me away from the city and the Harlans, I tried to convince myself I was free. Leon was awake. My part in the bizarre drama was over. But the memory of his voice in the dream, pleading and possessive, clung to me like a ghost. My hometown was trapped in amber, unchanged by the years. The same dusty main street, the same sun-bleached houses. I stood before my childhood home, the key Tom had procured for me useless in my hand. The locks had been changed long ago. Before I could even think of what to do next, A familiar voice shouted my name. Scott. No freaking way. I turned to see Herbie, my best friend from a lifetime ago, looking just the same, only broader and more sun-weathered. He pulled me into a bone-crushing hug. Man, I thought you'd vanished off the face of the earth. I managed a weak smile. Me too. Seems the locks are new. Herbie grinned, scratching his head. Yeah, the town council did that after your uncle tried to sell the place out from under you. Didn't want him causing any more trouble. He effortlessly slung my bag over his shoulder. Come on, let's get you inside. He was a force of nature, dusting off furniture, dragging me to his mother's for a welcome home dinner of meatloaf and mashed potatoes, and filling the silence with years of town gossip. It was blessedly, achingly normal. But as I lay in my old bed that night, the unfamiliar quiet of the town pressing in, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was a fugitive. The next morning, Herbie was at my door with a mint milkshake. Still your favorite, right? He asked with a grin. The cold cup in my hand felt like an anchor to a simpler reality. He casually wiped a bead of sweat from my forehead, and I laughed, genuinely laughed, for the first time in months, shoving his hand away. Your place looks like a disaster zone, I commented, gesturing to the renovation work happening at his house next door. Herbie chuckled. You're not gonna believe it. Some rich guy from the city rented the upstairs apartment for an insane amount of money. A cold premonition snaked its way up my spine. I glanced over, and my heart stopped. There he was, leaning against the fence separating our properties, watching me with an unnerving intensity. Leon. His eyes immediately locked onto Herbie's arm, which was still slung casually over my shoulder. I recoiled as if burned, a hot blush creeping up my neck. I gotta go, I muttered, bolting back inside my house, my heart hammering a panicked rhythm. He was here. He had followed me. The bulletins flickered into view, their glowing text dripping with sarcasm. Oh snap. Lover boy tracked you down. Looks like Scott's got a stalker. Another message appeared. Leon doesn't give up that easily. This is getting good. I groaned, pressing the heels of my hands into my eyes. Not helping, I whispered to the empty room. Leon was awake, untethered, and apparently obsessed. And he was standing in my backyard, staring at me like I was a puzzle he was determined to solve. I should have been terrified, but a reckless, stupid part of my heart was just wondering what he wanted. Life in my hometown was supposed to be my escape, a return to a simpler world, but Leon's silent, brooding presence had turned it into a pressure cooker. He was a ghost at the edge of my vision, a constant, unnerving reminder of the chaos I'd fled. I'd see him by the fence when I woke up, catch a glimpse of him at the local convenience store, a dark, expensive shadow in a town of faded denim and worn-in flannel. I tried my best to ignore him, throwing myself into the mundane rhythm of life with Herbie, hoping that a routine of normalcy could somehow exorcise him. Herbie, bless his oblivious heart, was my willing accomplice, completely unaware of the silent war of wills happening across his backyard. Today was the annual farmers market, the biggest social event of the year. Herbie was running his mom's jam and preserve stall and had press-ganged both me and Leon into helping. We all piled into his rickety, rust bucket of a truck, Herbie blasting a country song about tractors and lost love, while Leon sat silently in the truck bed, his intense gaze fixed on me in the rearview mirror. I looked away, the back of my neck prickling with heat. You really don't have to do this, I muttered, loud enough for him to hear over the music. A faint, Almost imperceptible smile touched Leon's lips. What, and miss out on all the authentic small-town fun. Herbie promised me it would be an experience. Herbie, hearing his name, laughed boisterously. Damn right. Stick with me, city boy. I'll make a country convert out of you yet. The market was a chaotic symphony of sights, sounds, and smells. Herbie immediately abandoned us to set up his stall, leaving me and Leon to navigate the bustling crowd alone. It was surreal, wandering past stalls selling hand-knit sweaters and artisanal cheeses with the heir to a criminal empire at my side. Leon, looking ridiculously out of place in his tailored jacket, seemed surprisingly engaged. He pointed to a booth filled with hand-carved wooden animals. Did you have toys like that when you were a kid? He asked, his voice unexpectedly gentle. I was taken aback by the simple, normal question. Yeah, for a while. I had a whole collection of wooden crickets. I thought they were the coolest things ever. Right up until they all escaped in my room one night and drove me insane. I smiled at the memory. Turns out they're not as cute when they're real. A genuine grin spread across Leon's face, transforming his severe features, making him look younger, almost boyish. Well, you're cute enough for the both of you. I choked on my own spit, giving him a light shove. Oh, shut up. My face was burning, but I was laughing, and for one fleeting, fragile moment, it felt easy. We were just two guys at a market, and the world wasn't a terrifying, complicated mess. The bulletins, of course, chose that moment to make an appearance. Ah, look at Scott blushing. Leon's got some serious game. Another one popped up. He's totally gonna try for a makeout session behind the pumpkin patch. I'd bet money on it. I scowled at the air. Mind your own business, I hissed under my breath. Leon didn't seem to notice. He was watching a small child stroking a pet rabbit, a strange, soft expression on his face. I was about to tease him about it when a voice, sharp and laced with venom, cut through the noise of the crowd. Well, if it isn't the Jinx. I froze, the laughter dying in my throat. It was Mrs. Carter, the town's unofficial gossip columnist and reigning queen of misery. Her eyes, small and hard like pebbles, were fixed on me with undisguised malice. A small contingent of her cronies gathered behind her, their stares like tiny daggers. I'm surprised you dared to show your face here again, Scott. Thought you'd have the decency to keep your bad luck away from the rest of us. My stomach clenched. That old, hateful label, slamming into me with the force of a physical blow. The whispers started, spreading through the nearby crowd like a disease. I heard his entire family, followed him. Best to stay away. You don't want to catch whatever he's got. Leon stepped forward, placing himself slightly in front of me. His voice was quiet, but it had an edge of cold steel. Back off. You have no idea what you're talking about. Mrs. Carter merely smirked. Oh, and who's this? Your new, fancy city boyfriend? Doesn't change what he is. She pulled a small vial from her purse filled with what I assumed was salt or some other superstitious garbage. She took a step closer, raising her hand as if to throw its contents at me. I flinched, my body locking up, a tidal wave of humiliating childhood memories crashing over me. Before she could move, Leon's hand shot out, his fingers closing around her wrist in a grip that made her gasp. You touch him, he said, his voice deadly calm, and I promise you, you will regret it for the rest of your life. The crowd fell silent. The vial dropped from her nerveless fingers and shattered on the ground. She stammered and backed away, but in the confusion, Someone from the crowd shoved me hard. I lost my balance, my ankle twisting beneath me with a sickening crack. I hit the ground, a white-hot spear of pain shooting up my leg. Before I could even process what had happened, Leon was there, hauling me to my feet, his arm a steady, solid presence around my waist. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice tight with a fury that wasn't directed at me. Yeah, I gritted out, the humiliation burning hotter than the pain. The crowd began to melt away, and Leon helped me limp over to a nearby bench. He knelt, his touch surprisingly gentle as he examined my rapidly swelling ankle. "You don't have to do this," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I'm fine." He didn't look up. "No, you're not. And I'm not gonna let you deal with that kind of garbage by yourself." I swallowed hard, a painful lump forming in my throat. He was angry for me. It was a novel and deeply unsettling sensation. The bulletins chimed in, relentless as ever. Leon in shining armor mode activated. "Scott, you are so doomed. They are definitely going to kiss again. I'll give you 10-1 odds." I ignored them, but the heat in my face had nothing to do with the pain. Leon stood, his jaw set in a hard line. "Let's get you home." By that evening, I was delirious, my ankle throbbing in time with the pounding in my head as a fever took hold. Herbie's mom fluttered around me with cool cloths and worried noises. But it was Leon who took control, calling a doctor, fetching ice packs, and refusing to leave my side. I drifted in and out of a feverish haze, eventually slipping into a dream. I was a child again, trapped in my dark, empty house, Mrs. Carter's voice echoing around me. "Jinx, Jinx, Jinx." I was small and helpless and alone. And then Leon was there, his hand closing firmly around mine. "You're not that little boy anymore," he said, his voice a steady anchor in the nightmare. "You're allowed to fight back. You're stronger than all of them." I woke with a jolt, the fever broken, drenched in sweat. Leon was asleep in the armchair next to my bed, his head slumped at an uncomfortable angle, dark circles etched beneath his eyes. He had stayed with me all night. My heart did a stupid, treacherous thing and skipped a beat. The bulletins flickered, their light softer this time. "He's burning through his dream-walking energy to help you. Dude is completely whipped." Another message floated gently in the air. "You're falling for him, aren't you, Scott?" I didn't have an answer. I just watched Leon sleep, listening to the slow, steady rhythm of his breathing, and wondered how I had gotten myself into this deep. He wasn't just a Harland anymore. He was something else entirely, something that made my chest ache in a way I didn't know how to name. The fever was gone, but my thoughts remained a jumbled, chaotic mess. Leon had become a permanent fixture, an extension of my own shadow. He was there when I woke up, a silent presence in the kitchen, and he was there at night, sleeping in the armchair he'd refused to relinquish. He was fixing the squeaky step on my porch, carrying in groceries, and generally acting like he was trying to win some kind of domesticity award. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for him to bring up his father, the fiancé, the entire Harlan mess. But he said nothing. He just watched me with that quiet, unnerving intensity, as if he was waiting for me to be the first one to break the silence. I was beginning to think he might be right. Herbie was no help at all, a co-conspirator in my confusion. Every time Leon was around, Herbie would get this stupid, knowing grin on his face, like he was the only one in on the universe's best joke. It was my last day. I had made a decision. I was going back to the city, back to the Harlands, back to whatever fresh hell awaited me. Running wasn't a solution. It was a delay. Herbie was helping me pack, tossing my few belongings into a duffel bag with a complete lack of care. "So," he said, waggling his eyebrows suggestively, "you and Leon, huh? Never thought you were the type to snag a rich city boy." I nearly sprayed coffee all over my clean shirts. "Shut up, Herbie," I coughed, my face instantly turning a shade of crimson that betrayed my denial. "It is not like that." He just threw his head back and laughed, a loud, obnoxious sound. He then shoved a small, square package into my hand. I glanced down. Condoms. My eyes went wide, and I hurled the package back at him. "You are the absolute worst human being I have ever met." He just cackled, easily dodging the projectile. "Hey, a modern man supports his friend's endeavors. Just looking out for my little bro." The bulletins flared into existence, their glow practically vibrating with glee. "Herbie for the assist. Look at Scott's face, it's an actual tomato. Leon, this is your cue. Make a move." I groaned, snatching the package and shoving it deep under a couch cushion. "All of you are completely useless," I muttered at the air. Herbie just raised an eyebrow. Leon chose that moment to walk in, catching the tail end of my mortification. A small smile played on his lips, as if he was privy to the joke. "Ready to go?" he asked, his voice low and intimate, as if we were sharing a secret. I just nodded, avoiding his gaze. At the train station, Herbie pulled me into one last bear hug. "Don't be a stranger, you hear? And don't let any of those city slickers give you a hard time." I smiled, a lump forming in my throat. "Thanks, Herbie." He shot a conspiratorial wink over my shoulder at Leon, who just rolled his eyes. This time, Leon had arranged for a car, and the ride back to the city was filled with a thick, charged silence. At some point, his hand brushed against mine on the center console. I didn't pull away. His fingers tentatively curled around my own, his palm warm and steady against mine. My pulse hammered out a stupid, hopeful rhythm. Stepping back into the Harland estate felt like walking willingly into a lion's den. Herbert greeted us at the door, his face wreathed in a triumphant smile, as if my sudden disappearance had been part of his master plan all along. "Scott, it's good to have you back," he boomed, clapping me on the shoulder. "Leon here has been moping around like a lost puppy without you." Leon snorted, shoving his hands in his pockets. "I have not," but the tips of his ears were bright pink, and I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from grinning. Ray was there too, his expression a thundercloud of disapproval. "This is a profound mistake," he bit out, his glare sharp enough to draw blood. "Leon requires a suitable partner, not this." I stiffened, but before I could even react, Leon stepped in front of me, shielding me with his body. His voice was ice. "This is my decision, father, not yours." Ray's mouth opened to retort, but a sharp look from Herbert silenced him. For once, the old tyrant was on my side. I didn't trust it for a second, but I'd take the temporary reprieve. Later that night, Leon led me out onto the sprawling balcony overlooking the city. The lights below blurred into a glittering tapestry, but all I could see was him. His eyes searched mine, all pretense stripped away. "Why did you come back?" he asked, his voice quiet. I swallowed, my own hands feeling clumsy and useless. I couldn't keep running, I admitted, and I think I wanted to find out what this is. I gestured vaguely at the space between us, my face growing warm. You're not just some guy in a coma anymore. He let out a soft, genuine laugh, a sound that seemed to reverberate right in my chest. Good, because I have no intention of ever letting you go again. He stepped closer, his hand coming up to cup my jaw, his thumb stroking my cheek. I didn't flinch. I leaned into his touch. His lips brushed against mine, a gentle, questioning touch this time, a world away from the desperate, possessive kiss of the dream. I kissed him back, my hands finding purchase on the lapels of his jacket, pulling him closer. And for the first time, I wasn't thinking about survival or systems or threats. I was just thinking about him. The bulletins flickered into view, their light soft and muted. Well, damn. They're actually doing it. About time. A second message appeared. Congratulations, you two idiots. You finally figured it out. I pulled back, slightly breathless. Leon was grinning. A real, unguarded grin that lit up his entire face. You see them too, don't you? He asked, his gaze flickering to the empty air beside me. I nodded, a sheepish smile on my face. Yeah. They're incredibly annoying. He laughed again, pulling me into a hug. I suppose we owe them one. Months later, we stood in a small, elegant venue. I was in a suit that, for the first time in my life, felt like it belonged to me. Leon, beside me, looked sharper and more handsome than any man had a right to be. Herbert was in the front row, beaming. Ray was in the back, sulking. The officiant's words were a pleasant, meaningless blur. The only thing that felt real was Leon's hand in mine, solid and warm. We spoke our vows, not the flowery, poetic kind, but simple, honest promises. And when he leaned in to kiss me, it wasn't a dream, and it wasn't a desperate act of survival. It was a beginning. And so, the boy who was once sold to settle a debt, the jinx who was meant to be a disposable tool, found himself bound not by a contract, but by a promise freely given. But what do you think? Was Leon's initial possessiveness and dream-walking a terrifying red flag? Or was it a desperate act from a man trying to hold onto the one person who could save him? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed Scott and Leon's chaotic journey to find each other, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more stories like this. We'll see you in the next one.